There are three choices every church makes that will determine its missional potential. In a church's first 5 to 10 years, there are three choices it will make that will decide its lifetime impact. And those choices are important for all church leaders, but particularly for new church planters. And so it's out of conviction, really, to see all churches reach their greatest missional potential, that the leadership at Exponential, myself, Todd Wilson, and others, we asked Ed Stetzer, along with Lifeway, to do research on 350,000 churches across the United States. Now, as a result of that research, what we discovered is you can put every church into one of 5 categories. And so in category 1 are churches that are actually in decline or subtraction. That's category number 1. Then in category number 2, you have churches that are plateaued. And if you put category number 1, decline, and category number 2, plateau together, about 80% of the 350,000 churches in the United States would be in categories number 1 and category number 2. And then in category number 3, you have churches that are growing by addition. And across the United States, about 16% are growing by addition. Those are category number 3. And then if you move to category number 4, what we call reproducing churches, about 4%, only 4% of all churches across the United States would be what we call reproducing, planted a site or planted a church. And truth be known, if you dive a little deeper, only about half of those did it on purpose. About half of them were by church splits. So really only about 2% intentionally reproduce. And then finally you have category number 5. And those are what we call multiplying churches or movement-making churches. And as best we can tell, according to our research, there are no churches that would fall into category 5. Overall, there's only a few churches in the United States that are what we call 4s, and no churches that are in number 5 category. Now, this actually presents 2 different challenges. First, at Exponential, we feel a real responsibility. We see it as our role to provide thought leadership for churches and to really champion the cause of multiplication so churches like yours can reach their full missional potential. So what we've done is we've gone around the world to try to platform leaders at our conferences who are leading 4s or leading 5s. And so if you were at our Exponential conference this past year, you heard Steve Morrell from the Philippines. He pastors a church of 62,000 people in 15 different locations that's planted more than 100 churches globally. You also heard from Ajay Law from India, who's now planted more than 1,700 churches in his part of the world. You also got a chance to hear from Ying Kai from China, who leads a movement of more than 140,000 churches in which 1.7 million people have come to faith and been baptized. Now that's a 5. That's multiplying. That's movement. And so that's one challenge we feel to really provide thought leadership. But the second challenge is we need churches who will respond with a holy discontent at saying, I don't want to just be a 3, just growing. But instead, I'm determined to be a 4 or be a 5. We need churches who lead the way and say, I don't want to just grow or even plant 1 or 2 churches, but I really do. I want to think in terms of movement. In his Watershed book, The Tipping Point, it was author Malcolm Gladwell who said something very interesting. He said, that is the paradox of the epidemic, that in order to create one contagious movement, you often have to create many small movements first. And I've spent some time thinking through this. And I believe there are several significant choices every church and every church leader faces. But if we will make small movements, each of our churches, we have the opportunities to become 4s and even 5s. And so here are 3 critical choices to becoming a multiplying church. The first choice exists within this tension of what I call here and there. If you're serious about being a multiplying and movement-making church, then your church, you will start here, but you'll know that I need to go there, and then there, and there, and there. But understand, there will always be this tension between focusing on right here, but also going there. Several times over the last few years, I've had the opportunity to lead Exponential practicums, where we teach from the book my brother John and I wrote called Exponential, How You and Your Friends Can Start a Missional Church Movement. And one of the things we do is we give every leader a napkin, and we actually call it a dream napkin. And we ask them on that napkin to write out their dream for their church. What do you think your God-sized dream is? What does God want to do? And what's been kind of cool is we've done this enough time that people will actually report back to me. They might tweet me a picture or through Instagram show me a picture. I got one this week on somebody's blog, and they kind of, here's my dream napkin, and here's my update on how it's kind of unfolding. Well, what's fascinating is you can tell with just a glimpse at their dream napkin if their church they're leading will become a 3 or maybe a 4 or possibly even a 5. Because what's on there clarifies what their church, whether their church is just about here or if it's also about going there and there. And there may be like kind of one circle with one church in one city, or there may be one circle with lots of spokes coming off of it as one church that's going to be in lots of different directions. Or I've seen some napkins that's like full of circles, looks kind of like an atomic explosion, representing all the places they plan to plant churches. And you can go like, wow, now there's the possibility of being a 5. I remember Rick Warren saying, I'd rather see one church that's starting 10 churches than a church of 1,000 people that's not starting any churches. And I'll tell you what, I absolutely agree, because there's more exponential potential in 10 multiplying churches than in one just very large church. But there's a tension that we all live with as leaders, and it's a tension between right here, where we've started, where our church is, and there, the next new church, the next new site, the next new plant. And let me warn you, almost everything will kind of suck you and pull you right back toward here. One of the things we do at New Thing is we insist that every one of our New Thing churches fill out what we call an MRP. An MRP just stands for My Reproducing Plan. And we ask them to do it every year. If you're going to be a part of New Thing, you have to have a reproducing plan. And what that does is it pulls you away from only here kind of thinking, only here kind of behaving, toward there, and the next there. And I think all of us, we need something like this to make sure that we do what we say we want to do, which allows us to reach our missional potential to become these 5s. To become 5s, we need churches that will make an intentional choice. I'm not going to just stay here, but I'm also going to go there. Ask yourself, if epidemics, contagious movements occur through small movements, what is one small movement, just one small movement that your church can make from here toward there? If you were to have a dream napkin and write it out on the back of a napkin as simply as you could, what would it look like? Is it mostly just about growing here? Or as you lay it out, is it also about going there, and there? Ask yourself this. Do you and your church have as many going there strategies as you do growth here strategies? I'm telling you, that's a big difference between a 3 versus a 4 and a 5. Do you have a multiplying or reproducing plan of some kind? Well, the tension of here versus there can be resolved very early and very clear with a clear mission and a clear vision. The dream you have for your church can take care of that, and it can move you towards becoming a 4 and even becoming a 5. But once you make that choice, you're just beginning, because now, I'm telling you this, for the rest of your leadership, you'll have to face the tension of, do I grow or do I send? It's the second choice. Will you only be about growing your church, or will you also be about sending to other places, people and resources? This is where it goes from being a dream to getting very personal, and getting very, very, very practical. At a recent New Thing gathering, Pastor Oscar Muro of Nairobi Chapel, he talked about what it meant to really be a sending church and how they at Nairobi Chapel do this leadership residency. And it was just brilliant. Currently, they have about more than 100 people, 100 leaders in their leadership residency pipeline. And the way they break it out is in year 1, they challenge them to serve in a ministry. And then year 2, they challenge them to be a part of a church plant, oversee a particular ministry on a church planting team. And then year 3, they plant a church. Well, he went on to explain his whole ministry is focused on Psalm 17:18, which says, even when I'm old and gray, do not forsake me, my God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your mighty acts to all who are to come. And I remember Oscar telling me, he said, Dave, listen, I'm going to invest the rest of my life by making sure I'm surrounded constantly by young people in their 20s and sending them out to start new works. See, to become 5s, we need churches that choose sending and not just growing. And ask yourself, how much energy is directed towards optimizing systems at kind of the mother church versus energy directed towards systems to develop leaders and staff to send out to start brand new churches and church plants? Are we hanging on to our best staff members? Or are we sending them out as church planners? Are we developing our best leaders to run our programs and staff my church? Or are we intentionally growing enough leaders that we know we're going to send, dozens of them out on a regular basis? Do we have excellence in our leadership residency program that's training church planners? Have we emphasized excellence in our leadership development and our sending structures, not just our growing structures? I'm telling you, we'll never see a move-making church in the U.S. until we get as passionate about sending, as we are growing. Ask yourself, What's one step that your church could take towards sending? There's a third tension. The third tension is this tension between really buildings versus planting. And you're going to have to make a choice. I remember our very first newcomer reception at Community. I mean, I think we were, I don't know, good grief, 3 or 4 weeks old. We were meeting in the cafeteria at the local high school, and I got done talking, and I asked, has anybody got any questions? And this short, bald, but very enthusiastic guy in the back of the room raised his hand real high. And I remember exactly who it was because that gentleman later became the mayor of our town. And so I said, yes, question, George. And George said, well, Dave, when are we going to have our own church building? And I was thinking to myself, you got to be kidding me. You know, we're 3 or 4 weeks old. But I remember telling him, I said, we'll build a building when it helps us better accomplish the mission. And we really tried to stick to that ever since. See, in the American church, particularly in this context, a tension that every church planter and every leader feels very quickly is the tension between buildings versus planting. And it doesn't have to be an exclusive either or, but we have to be honest about this whole conversation. Now, buildings, I mean, they can be a big help, but they can also be a huge hindrance to the mission. How can they help? Well, I remember Lyle Schaller, a mentor of mine, saying, hey, Dave, the most overlooked element of new church development is the importance of place. People like having a place. And buildings do. They give you credibility. They give you legitimacy, probably especially in the U.S. And you'll often, when you open a brand new space, you'll see a bump in attendance, and that can, if done right, be a part of helping people find their way back to God, real conversion growth. However, buildings can also be a hindrance. They're a huge expense. It costs money. It costs time to raise the money. It also takes effort to fill the space and then keep it filled. And buildings they'll also create unintended consequences. And trust me on this too. The building you build now will not be the building you want 10 years from now. And all that being said, I'm sure of this. We can never build buildings big enough or fast enough to keep up with what God wants to do. I'm telling you, we'll never build buildings big enough or fast enough to keep up with what God wants to do through His church. And one of the things we did recently, before we bought property back in the day and built a building, we actually started 2 locations. And I think what that choice did is it moved Community as a church in the right direction. People, leaders, staff, everybody knew the priority. That we're not going to be just about buildings. We're also going to be about the mission of Jesus advancing His kingdom in other places. Now, recently, what we did with our last edition at our largest location, the way we talked about it, I think was very, very important. We told people, say, hey, we're going to build this auditorium, and this auditorium here is going to help us reach thousands. But then we pointed to the leadership training center. This leadership training center we're building, it's going to allow us to reach tens of thousands, even more, as we train church planters there. See, to become 5s, we need churches that are focused on planting more than just buildings. If you want your church to reach its maximum missional impact, church leaders, you have to have the courage to make those tough choices. Then you'll become 5s. Ask yourself this. Is your focus, is your attention, not just on here, but is it also there, there, and there? Like Jesus described, not just Jerusalem, but Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. Ask yourself, is your church allocating significant resources? I'm talking about people, money, even 10% of your budget for sending and not just growing. Ask yourself, is your church more focused on building buildings than it is building the kingdom? Your church, I'm telling you, by God's design, was meant to be a 5, and it can be if you'll make those courageous choices.